In a world where everything is on a map, feeling that sense of discovering something just doesn't really exist anymore. There are designated footpaths and optimized GPS routes to guide you through life. And with all of this insanity going on around us every day, it's natural to want to escape and briefly live in a new immersive world. So I get the appeal of open world gaming, and the idea of loading up a brand new world and just happening upon different little surprises is lovely. But the reality of most open world games is that isn't what happens. Most open world games drop you into the middle of a map and instead of letting you discover it, give you a guided tour of every inch with waypoints and dotted lines. But there's a game that redefined the way that I looked at open world design and video games in general. This is how Choo Choo Charles changed my life. Okay, the game is really not that deep, and even I can't take that intro seriously. But I couldn't resist a good April Fool's opening segment, okay? We are still going to dive into Choo Choo Charles though, which might come as a surprise, because if you've played the game, you're probably wondering one thing. What is there really to say? It's utterly okay? And it's true, the game runs terribly. No matter what configuration of low settings I tried, my beast of a gaming PC could not handle it without stuttering. What exists of its combat is mundanely bare. Its depth is that of a puddle, honestly. And the stealth mechanics? Well, there are none. And yet, I had a great time playing this game. Over the 4 hours I took to 100% it, I was grinning from ear to ear, just like my Steam-powered pursuer. So here's how Choo Choo Charles, despite being a complete mess of a game on almost every level, made me fall in love with open worlds again. Think of this video essay as a spiritual successor of sorts to this one, which, holy shit, that's a lot of views. Thanks? Before we get into the video essay, I just wanted to jump in here and remind you to subscribe and like the video for more content like this every single month. It's free and really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much. You've seen this shot in basically every video essay about open world games you've ever watched. It's a moment in Breath of the Wild that's supposed to inspire us to want to explore and seek out adventure. Look at all of this stuff, all of this picturesque landscape. It's yours to explore, but then the game promptly railroads you into an hour-long tutorial segment. And once you do have the ability to leave the Great Plateau, you're given a quest marker on your map telling you exactly where to go. And even then, you're not actually done with the game's tutorial. It still needs to teach you about Korok seeds and the camera and shops and side quests and fairy fountains and maracas. So while you could ignore that to go off and do whatever you want, first-time players are encouraged to follow these quest markers to learn more about the basics of the game's systems. Because Breath of the Wild is a modern-day AAA open-world experience, and a great one at that, I love this game, but Nintendo packed it to the brim with features that it has to explain to the player. So in reality, this shot at the beginning and the moment where a new player is really given the reins of their time in Hyrule are about 5 hours apart for most people. That doesn't mean the game is bad by any means, but it does point towards a lot of modern open world game design skewing more linear than it might seem. Now take something like Elden Ring, another open world game, maybe not AAA by the standard definition, but just as jam-packed with systems and things to learn, if not more so. After a tutorial that lasts maybe 30 minutes for a FromSoft newcomer, you're given that panoramic opening shot. Then very gently nudged towards this castle with a vague arrow of golden light. And that's it. No matter which direction you go, you'll always be given access to your horse and leveling up your character after resting at your third overworld site of grace. So it accomplishes the same thing as Breath of the Wild's opening, but in a much more efficient way. And most importantly, in a way that quietly guides you without forcing you down any one specific route. And yeah, this is an open world game that actually delivers on the genre's most enticing selling point: exploration. Which, at least for me, runs counter to the handholding that's present in so many of the big open world titles that are on the market. It can often feel like you're given this enormous playground, but then with all of these quest markers and dotted lines, you're told exactly how to play in it. A lot of games like this are much more focused on the destination than the actual journey, each point of interest being well developed, but the dirt paths to get there become increasingly repetitive, incentivizing you to use fast travel to reach the next objective, rather than devs taking the time to make the trek to your next checkpoint very interesting. There might be a few bushes or curves or throwaway encounters on your way there, but not much to write home about, and it almost never feels like you're the one discovering the path. So when I booted up Choo Choo Charles, I saw my first objective. Following my new companion Eugene through a quick tutorial, I took on my first task in this brand new open world: walking to a quest marker. At first, I was a little deflated. Was this going to be another open world with barren dirt paths and boring waypoints? But here's what changed the game for me. No matter where you are on the map, this demonic spider train can come out of nowhere, whistles blaring, and chase you down, making every moment you travel through this map potentially deadly. There's no pack of pushover wolves to swat away like gnats. You're always looking over your shoulder thinking, I haven't seen Charles for a while. And what's better, your quest markers are placed just far enough apart and just far enough from the tracks that getting out of your cobbled together train becomes a mad dash to relative safety almost every time. Despite being literally on rails, I felt like I was scratching my exploration itch because no matter how silly each diversion of a side quest was,
I need my pickles!
they were always a surprise. And with this roaming, unkillable, half-train, half-giga-spider threatening to pop out at any second, I felt like my time in the overworld wasn't just a guided tour to each plot point. It was actually an engaging adventure. In 2011, I had just graduated high school. I didn't get into any of the 15 colleges that I applied for. The future I was heading into, putting it lightly, was uncertain. And while all my friends spread across the country to pursue their higher education, I was sitting at home. My first experience with long-term depression. I had nothing going for me. And then The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim came out that November and gave my 18-year-old self somewhere to escape to, where my companions weren't going to move away, where I didn't have to deal with rejected applications. All I had to worry about was exploring this Nordic landscape on the brink of war. Virtually suspended. No time passes in Skyrim. Not really anyway. I put endless hours into my Xbox 360 version of Skyrim. Picking flowers, helping the locals. I was integrating myself into the society of Jarls and Greybeards, taking on every side quest I could. And it was really fun to just run around the map and disconnect from what was looming over me in reality. my exceedingly mediocre life was a non-issue. But for all the time I spent among the rivers and mountains of Skyrim, beyond a certain point, I never advanced the main questline of that game. I never really felt like I needed to. And it wasn't until picking up the game again 10 years later in 2021 while streaming on Twitch that I actually saw the main quest through to the end. And honestly, it wasn't really that great. It was a serviceable plot at best. Unfortunately, Skyrim, along with the rest of Bethesda's tentpole franchises, and not to mention their contemporaries like Ubisoft, have become known for uninteresting plotlines that boil down to checklists and fetch quests. And this lackluster throughline tends to appear in most sprawling games of this scale, because how can you write a plot that's both immediate enough to make a player care, but open enough to let them explore the vast game you created without totally breaking their immersion? Well, as we see, it's next to impossible. Oh, the return of dragons threatens life as we know it? I better pick some flowers and get in some quality time with my friend.
What are you doing?
My baby was kidnapped? Well, let me just work on my base over here first. When I think back to my favorite moments in open world games, they're never related to the main story. Rather, what sticks out to me is the much more fleshed out side content dotted around the map. The standout one-offs, the Terry Towns, and the Wang Dang Atomic Tangos.
Please assume the position.
No matter how urgent the main story might feel on paper, due to the nature of these larger-than-life experiences, players are always going to go off and do other things. Main questlines in open-world games often run counter to what we actually came to these games for. Instead of exploring, the main quest usually tells us exactly where to go, how to get there, and what to do when we arrive. The main quest is about the destination, not about experiencing the world around you on that journey. When games give me a handful of ways to complete my main objective, with no prescribed routes and lots of choices, that's when I actually feel like I want to complete an open world game. A short hike comes to mind here. Sure, there is a main path, but your goal of reaching the top of the mountain is one that you can tackle in any way that you want. Do any amount of side questing along the way, earn as many feathers as possible to make it easier for yourself, or take the harder route for a bit of a challenge. Just enjoy yourself and find a way to get up there at your own pace. And this is something that Choo Choo Charles also got the memo on. The story itself might be pretty simple, but structure-wise, it lets you tackle your main objective in any way that you'd like. To get the 3 eggs you need to trigger the endgame, you can infiltrate the 3 caves in whichever order suits you. You can go at it gung-ho, trigger all the guards' attention, and make a daring escape, or you can sneak through without ever being spotted. And along your path, there's optional side content that rewards you with currency you can put towards upgrades. This type of structure for a game's main questline allows for flexible play, exploration, and for the player to create their own story. It's basically the perfect framework for an open world narrative, which is why everyone's 2022 Game of the Year Elden Ring uses that same structure when you boil it down. Vague setup, collect things in any order you want, engage with side content to level up, voila! You've got something to work towards at your own pace that encourages you to explore rather than going down a list of predetermined stops along a sightseeing tour. And yeah, I am saying that Elden Ring and Choo Choo Charles have the same main questline structure. Can't wait for the comments on that cringe take. When I first saw the trailer for Choo Choo Charles on Twitter, like most people, I was pretty intrigued. A horror game with a spider demon train thing? Okay, sure, sign me up. That looks absolutely wild. And your main mode of transportation is also a train? Okay, that's interesting. Oh, wait. it's an open world game. For me, when I hear open world game, what comes to mind is an overabundance of systems. Systems within systems. It's always systems all the way down. Crafting, progression trees, cooking, base building, pissing. And most of the time in an open world game, these systems don't really tie into each other meaningfully. So things like cooking or base building can kind of feel like filler without much impact on the rest of the game. The more focus an open world game has in its mechanics, the more interconnected everything is, and the more fun the process of exploring can be. So about a year passes, Choo Choo Charles comes out, and it's pretty janky. As a gamer of the generation that grew up on this, though, a little jank doesn't scare me. But to the game's credit, it has an incredible amount of focus. It's always a bit of a gamble when you hear a one-man dev's first big video game release is going to be open world. There's so many things that can go wrong, and it must be tempting to cram in everything. Every mechanic under the sun to appeal to the widest demographic. But on my journey to defeat this train demon, I collected scraps to upgrade and repair my train. Occasionally, I picked a lock and did a quick fetch quest. But it was all connected and fed back into the same thing, upgrading my train to better deal with Charles. It might be basic, but it's lean game design. There was no fat to trim. And honestly, I'm kind of here for it. I didn't have to worry about anything else. The focus is train on train action and wait, the focus is train versus train combat. Open world games are big undertakings, and they can take a lot of time and effort to create. So to help devs meet deadlines and avoid crunch, there are lots of tools out there to expedite the process of crafting the terrain of a larger map. Whether AI generation or certain assets getting copy-pasted, there are impressive tools out there to make this task a lot more manageable. And I'm all for people working smarter, not harder. Game development crunch should not have to be a thing. I want games that are slightly less polished if it means that people have reasonable working environments. But I will say, the bigger open world maps get, the more that lack of handcrafted overworld design becomes pretty obvious. And as a player, unfortunately, the overworld between points of interest can just kind of feel like dead air, like filler. This issue became wildly apparent when I tried out the demo for Ravenbound during the Steam Next Fest in February of this year. If you haven't heard of this game, here's the deal. It's an open world game, but it's also a roguelike, and also a Souls-like, and also a deck builder, and you can also transform into a raven and fly anywhere. I commend the devs for trying something weird and ambitious. I love a bit of weird in my games. I mean, clearly, I'm making this video essay about Choo Choo Charles. But all of these features and all of these ideas and this entire map being procedurally generated every time since it's a roguelike really did not make for a fun experience. Everything was just points of interest with the most linear connecting paths you've ever seen. Again, small dev team, I get it, it's an open world, but wow, as a player, it is just not fun to explore. In contrast to this overwhelming amount of ideas, Choo Choo Charles is hyper-focused on its two main gameplay pillars: the train mechanics and the tension of its horror. Making the game open world doesn't hurt either of these experiences. It could have easily included a cooking system or base building or fishing, all staples of most bigger open worlds that seem to not really have much of a focus. Without tying everything together, open worlds can just kind of feel like a mess of side quests and collectibles without much of a purpose. When a game, any game, not just an open world one, has a great system or mechanic to showcase, it's always a more engaging experience when everything else is built to support that mechanic. A horror game where you can drive a train? Give the player a turret on the back and place rails that cover the entire map. Put the objectives near the main knot of rails, but just far enough to make them feel vulnerable when that distant train whistle sounds. Solid design. And something like the Pathless could have easily been a much different game if Giant Squid's level of focus hadn't been there. The game is all about momentum and environmental puzzles, so everything else on the island is created to allow that to shine. Wide open fields, and no combat to break up that flow. Outside of the game's 4 main boss fights, most of which are just environmental puzzles and momentum-based chase sequences in their own right, there's a world out there where the Pathless could have been made by a AAA development team. An open world structure using momentum-based movement and environmental puzzles, all of which are just jumbled and don't really connect to one another. Yeah, Sonic Frontiers is basically what happens when there's little to no focus around a core design concept. It feels like Sonic Team just kind of tossed every open world trope into a blender and threw in the blue blur with no real finesse. There's janky combat for kind of no reason and weirdly out of place rails everywhere you look. Nothing here feels like it fits together. Where the Pathless was built around the idea of momentum, Sonic Frontiers feels like it was built around the idea of, well, I'm not entirely sure.
The land feels sad and empty.
Yeah, I got the same feeling.
A great open world game, or any video game for that matter, is like a great essay. It's got a unique thesis statement or hook, and everything else supports that thesis. So yeah, when I looked at my calendar and saw I was uploading this month's video essay on April 1st, I figured I had to make a video essay about Choo Choo Charles. But what started as an April Fool's joke actually turned into a little bit of an introspection about a genre I thought was running out of steam. Honestly, this reimagining of what an open world game can be is kind of exciting. Despite mostly taking place on a set of static train tracks, it didn't railroad me into tackling the world in any specific order. It was the perfect length to be quirky fun without overstaying its welcome. And to its credit, it's a pretty focused affair without any unneeded fluff. Even though this game really didn't stick the landing on a technical level, I want more games that just go for a weird idea or a unique take on a genre. With a little bit of extra polish, Choo Choo Charles could be unironically great. I'm hoping the future of open world games looks a lot more like Solar Ash and a lot less like Skyrim. More exploring and less hand-holding, more surprises and less main quest guided tours, more focused design and less sprawling fluff. Give me more weird shit like Choo Choo Charles. I want to be excited about open world games again. I want gaming to feel like an adventure, like a journey, like an escape. Or like I'm being ravenously chased by a frenzied spider demon trained on a bender, you know? Hey there, thank you so much for watching the video essay. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give the video a like down below and subscribe to the channel, because I make new video essays like this every single month. Plus, it really helps the video get seen by more people, and since I put over 40+ hours into these video essays every single month, I would super appreciate it. Oh right, we have merch now. Check out the link in the description box if you want to get yourself some nice beanies and shirts in exchange for helping fund these videos. These videos aren't cheap to produce, so if you want to help contribute, you can always help over on the Ko-fi page. If you don't know what Ko-fi is, it's kind of like Patreon, but a lot cooler. A huge thank you to these monthly supporters over on that Ko-fi page: Voxamandius, Mumpow, Puzzled Monkey Tree, Dear Papaya, Oyster Milk, Bean Fiello, Nightmare God, Veltwalker, The Werewolf, Cap Danvers, Robertson, Sarah, CatDog 3000, Lionbite, and John Lax. For as little as $4 a month, you can also become a monthly supporter over on that Ko-fi page and get shoutouts at the end here, exclusive sneak peeks at future video essays, and some behind the scenes content. Also, if you want to check out any of the video games you see in any of my video essays, You can always check the description, and there will be affiliate links down below that help both the videos and trans charities at the same time. Plus, they sometimes have sales down there that Steam doesn't even have, so it's worth looking into. Anyway, thank you again. I appreciate you watching the video all the way to the end here. And, oh yeah, share the video!